Welcome back, my friends, to Side Quests VIII, episode 17. And back with me, my perennial companion, most recently a companion on a very interesting side quest, Wes Schantz. Wes, how are you doing?
Good to see you. Glad you're back, safe and sound, and I know your dog is glad you're back too.
Yes, no, I'm very glad to be back, and I might be even more glad to see my dog than he is to see me. And it's wonderful to be back and finally be talking to you a little bit closer to home. Though one thing I will tell the viewers, just if they consider this something like a buddy podcast, and this is something they get out of it, is that Wes actually not only podcasted with me once while I was over there, also presented a paper, a panel after me at a conference, and also engaged in a reading group with me and a couple of our other friends, where everybody had to meet at a different time. And actually, he was at school when
Yes.
when he met. And so we've really worked hard to keep the side quests going. And so I might say that that's something I appreciate about my perpetual and my constant companion, is that it's hard to shake him. Um,
I'm determined. I'm determined to have this time and carve it out and really yeah, like I was saying a minute ago, like make some forward momentum happen here and carry this thing forward throughout the
I,
summer.
I I love that. I mean, that's the only way it's going to happen, and I think we've made a good start. We're making a splash not only in the podcast. I mean, very little splash right now, but we have a lot of content.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so maybe it'll be like like one of those like lightning hitting an electrical reactor, Frankenstein, or some sort of conducting metaphor. I'm not a physicist, where only one spot needs to be hit, but it blows up the whole thing.
I'm picturing like in anime where they go through them with the sword and then a few seconds later they actually come apart, you know?
Ah,
So
yes.
it's a delayed strike kind of deal.
Yes,
Yeah.
they what do they call those in economics? They call them it's something very similar to that. It's they're like it's this is incorrect, but it's something like delayed indicators or
There
something
you go.
like that. Where so once you see that the thing is happening, or the fact that you don't see that something's happening is not evidence that it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't see the effect until later. And so some economists talk about like inflation with that, for example, and stuff like
Just a
that.
just a random example to kind
Yes,
of
no, right. I think we're going to come across many random political and economic examples as we continue to go. And I mean, that was something I integrated into my talk as
Yeah.
and so something I'm very apologetic about, Wes, is I had a whole slide dedicated to popularizing side quests and our
Oh.
channel. It had our link, it had side quests. I did send it to my new friend who said she's going to follow us,
Mm.
who also studies games and might be interesting to feature on the podcast. She's a Resident Evil expert, but
Hmm.
knows a lot about a lot of video games, and is was really cool to talk to, and was also the videographer. So
Oh, very
always
nice.
good to be friends with the videographer. And one thing she said, just to go on a tangent in the nature of side quests, is that I said one of the criticisms I've gotten of my lectures, and a criticism I have of myself, besides the fact that I move too much in my chair, and that's something I'm trying to correct today, is that I say and a lot.
Yeah.
But she said, as a videographer, that actually is kind of nice, because it shows that I'm actually thinking through what I'm saying, because it's so easy with AI now to scrub that
Hmm.
from one's podcast. And so even though I'm sort of championing her perspective there, that might give us that might actually lead to diverging paths if we end up wanting to have a more polished feel at some point. Easier and easier
I
to do so.
I just I'm very much of the let's say it's this way on purpose, like the punk ethos of low quality production, but high
I'm with it.
quality
I'm with it.
text content, if you will, you know?
Hear the scratches in the vinyl, as it
There
were.
you go.
Yeah. No, I get that, and I like that too. And she suggested that it's more authentic this way, and we're nothing if not authentic, my friend.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
so before the show, and I want to apologize to the audience for two things. I'm very tired. I had a 22-hour day yesterday coming back from the UK, and a very long layover, and then a very long delay. So I did
Mm.
not get in until late. But also for the fact that we have not yet progressed, but in the game, because we were most recently working on our presentations, which we will also be posting very soon. Presentations that we gave 2 days ago on Friday. So we've been working very hard along these lines. In fact, I present on Final Fantasy VIII, and Wes present on Final Fantasy VII. And well, I'd really like to talk about some of the experience and maybe some of the things that the viewers didn't get to see, or if the viewers happen to be people that were at the conference, they can either verify or tell me that I've misrepresented what they've said. But I would say I got some really interesting and positive feedback for sharing Final Fantasy VIII, and I would like to say something about how I now have a hypothesis 9 for why people dislike it,
Mm.
which is that it moves too far away from the archetypal core of an RPG game. And
Mm.
so it is a game made for outsiders, not
Mm.
for insiders in that respect. But I want to say this correctly, but also well, how, correctly across regions. You got a on a mini, like maybe 30 episodes of, maybe more than that. Um, and you got a pretty tough question
Mm.
from somebody who said he was obsessed with Final Fantasy VII, and so I kind of had easy duty because a lot of people had not played 8 or didn't get have an impact in 8, and there were people who really liked 8, but people who like 8 are not they're different from people who really like 7, is I would say.
Yeah.
You know, it's just there's a very different ethos to 8, and maybe we can talk about that. I mean, for all its similarities, amnesiac protagonists,
Mm.
characters that were supposed to be in one that were put in the other, you know, being only 2 years apart from each other, with Xenogears and Chrono Trigger sort of thrown in there as
Mhm.
well. Chrono Trigger obviously before, but Xenogears right then at the same time. Um, you got a heck of a question,
I
and
liked it.
and I know you dealt with it well, and you liked it, and you said that you want to block quote it, and you'll get the video soon.
Yes.
But I thought, I mean, had you not totally agreed with the question, that would have been like a I would consider that as a scholar like a rocket launcher being shot at, like
No, no, no.
Peacemaker. Um,
Peacemaker was
it,
wielded.
I honestly thought that was one of the tougher questions that was asked the entire conference.
Well,
And
you know,
I'm not
it's
saying it was bad intentioned at all. I just thought it was very, very tough.
oh, no, I think I'm expecting at the tail end of the conference, people have been sitting on their tough questions and they're ready to get out of there and go to the pub, right? So I was also, not presenting an ironclad paper by any sense. It was very much this is an exploratory, like here's some kind of orthogonal, or what's the word Babcock likes to use, right?
Orthogonist is what he calls you.
Octagonus, yeah,
Octagonist.
octagonus
Yes, no.
question. So I really appreciate that he just went to like, okay, but this is really what the game's about, right? Like Eris is saving the planet and she is the one performing the ultimate ritual here.
Hmm.
And like I said, I mean, um, he did a really good job. I didn't catch his name entirely. I think it was Ruben, maybe. I couldn't
I can
quite
look it
hear
up.
what
If
Chloe was saying, but it sounded like she knew who he was, so he sounded
Mhm.
important. And anyway, he had this like very, articulate summary slash um, exegesis of the game as a whole. And
Yes.
then,
Yes.
I think it was totally on point. And it would have been good if I had probably said something about the main part of the story, which I completely left out. I didn't like summarize the game at all. I didn't say like, here's what other people have said this is a game about, so much as like, here's this one person that I really like as a commentator, Dia Lucina, and I'm just going to run with this as far as it possibly can go in 15 minutes, right? Because I wanted to keep it really short. And I should mention I was presenting from school
Yes.
because of the timing of everything. And so I was trying to not lose my students' like in-person attention while also speaking at a level that would be hopefully interesting to the audience and the participants over there. So and from everywhere, right? We had people tuning in. It was like this hybrid thing. Is very impressive.
Yes.
The technological, uh, you know, hijinks they must have got up to get that all to work. And um, yeah, just it was really fun. I thought it went well. I really liked that there was a question for me, because the worst thing is
Yes.
when you give your whole
Yes.
talk and then no one has anything to say back to
Yes.
you.
Yes.
So no, yeah, I really appreciated it, and I think if he is really into Final Fantasy VII, he'd be a great person to follow up with and talk to more, and see what he's written or done research wise on the game. Yeah, that's the other fun part about being there, right? Is you actually get to interact, and you can make some of those those relationships start to you know um, not only get our word out there, but also just find out like from other people what's already been said, what's already
Yeah.
been written about, and it's pretty cool to finally start to ease into some of those higher echelons of scholarship. It's exciting.
Well, I was honestly hoping you would feel that way, Wes, and I thought that would be one of the biggest takeaways from you, just as a friend,
Yeah.
to feel that professional pressure and then to perform at the professional level around people that you just can't help but feel a little stressed to perform because they devote their lives to this. And
Yeah, that's like how they put food on the table, and
that's
that's
right.
not the case for me, and it
Well,
probably
not
won't
yet,
ever be.
not you want. Well, who knows? Who knows? But in any case, yeah, I hope it was transformative and it was an interesting side quest, and perhaps it leads to additional side quests. Perhaps
Mm,
it was one of those sorts of side quests where it unlocks portions of the game that were
exactly.
otherwise locked prior to that, and maybe it'll change the nature of the game to some extent. But something that I would like to do, maybe over the course of the rest of our talks,
Mm,
but certainly a little bit today, is I'd like to develop some of the ideas that I put forward in Final Fantasy VIII in my talk on Final Fantasy VIII. Mostly because that's actually what we're focusing on this particular time around. But also, well, I think I made some interesting claims, and I hope that I helped to highlight, at least for us, some of the most interesting aspects of Final Fantasy VIII. And I don't expect agreement by any means, but
well,
I, yeah.
I just wanted to throw in, like, if I had been really astute and on my toes, I could have used your language of the parallax to help answer that question, right?
Oh
Because it's
no.
like you're pointing out that this is the main, like, driving perspective within the game, but there is this effect of having these other perspectives that kind of bear on the same themes in some interesting and at times kind of uncomfortable ways, right? And so, particularly when you think about like the way that the creators of the games are not entirely in agreement with one
Mhm.
another, right? You have,
Yes.
and that's where you see seven turn into something very different with eight, as
Mhm.
Sakaguchi kind of takes a back seat and Nomura and the others kind of take the leading role, right? And so there's layers here, right? So the parallax is a super interesting idea. I think that you're kind of pulling from Ulysses, right, and scholarship on Joyce, and um, and it's very similar to the Bakhtin polyphonic idea of like lots of voices being involved in a single work. And this one uses more of a metaphor of seeing, but yeah, I think it's worth developing as we keep going through the game.
Well, in
Absolutely.
some ways, you've already done more with it than I think I did, and are seeing some of the really interesting consequences of the sort of constructed world that people make through their shared and differing perspectives, and how that literally is the case. And I was using literally, technically, and correctly. And I used it twice. I said that Squall is literally an amnesiac, not just he has some bad memory, and he literally embodies his father's perspective. It could not be any more on the nose than that. And so when I give the notion of parallax, I well, in a scholarly way, I wanted to make sure it was inarguable. Um, but then now that the argument is made that it's clearly present, seeing how deep it goes is the real task.
Mm.
And I think you've already started to develop that in ways that I had not conceived of, thus showing the value of the parallax and of course this podcast. Um,
You know who else? But I couldn't find a way to put it in there because I've never actually read her work. Ava Braun, right? The Homeric simile as this kind of like stepping out of the time of the story. And she's drawing that from Auerbach, I think, in Mimesis, right? His very
okay,
famous chapter about
yes.
Homer versus the Bible as ways of telling stories, right? And I don't totally agree with Auerbach. And I don't know that much about what Ava Braun said because, as I say, didn't read it yet. But I know that she sort of develops that idea of like Homeric time through simile, you sort of like pause the action, step back, see something else that's relevant, and then step back into the story, right? So it's kind of like an anti in medias res thing happening at points in the story. Um, yeah, I
Ah,
think that that's another possible way to develop and weave together again some of the stuff that's really influenced us as we've gone through our early careers as scholars. All that time at St. John's, she's an enormous fast, facet, uh, core piece of that edifice of scholarship there. So yeah, that's another one that I didn't see a way to bring it in because I was already juggling way too many things. But
sure,
I just
sure.
like I just really like that idea.
And you did so impressively. I should say I have Ava Braun's Homeric Moments as well as her work
Mm.
on Heraclitus, and I should give it a read because I've been meaning to. She and Auerbach had sort of similar modus operandi when it came to writing their major works. He was excluded from the university that he was in because of the Nazi terror at the time, and so he didn't have access to any secondary sources when he wrote his famous
So impressive, so
Prometheus.
impressive.
And
Yeah.
Eva Braun is known for really pursuing her own thoughts and not engaging with um, again, a correct use of literally any secondary literature. Like zero footnotes. I'll have to look into it to make sure that's not just an urban legend, but I believe that she is at the very least well known for really pursuing her own thoughts.
Mhm.
But as also a teacher of Homer for 10 years, I could say that's certainly that the technique of creating anticipation and through making somebody wait for the tension. This is something that maybe you see in really good movies that aren't quite pornographic, but will have like very titillating scenes within them. And you could see this in a sexual way, leading up, building that tension. But you can also see this in like an aggressive conflict way, like when a bad guy continually ups the ante and creates a sense of a need for vengeance in the
Mhm.
audience, and then to just pause and do this. And so this young man is who doesn't even have the soft down of a beard on his face yet is all of a sudden being compared to a leaf of grass or a boar fighting, or the simile is actually about him, like, oh, and he had not yet touched the marital bed of his wife, and his mother loved him because of his blonde curls, but thus his hair was bloodied by Menelaus's sword.
Yeah.
But right, the delay in the action, um, and right, it does create a multiple perspective for us too, because we either see this as an analog for a natural thing, war being like just a manifestation of nature, like boars and lions fighting or stealing cattle or something like that. But also for making us like I think the things they carried and All Quiet on the Western Front want to make us see the human element in a
Mm.
person, not simply a combatant. And I think this is part of what makes sophisticated literature is the inclusion of at least this level of parallax, where multiple perspectives then inform one's understanding of the character and the situation, the plot itself,
Yeah.
and that if one only has a superficial view of, oh, these are enemies, these are good guys, then that constitutes superficial literature, and I think a poor representation of a situation or what a person is really made of. And so I I am very happy to see that this is honored not only in Homer,
Mhm.
but also in Final Fantasy VIII.
Heck yeah. Yeah. So you got to go out with people, you got to talk to people afterwards. Yeah, it seemed like your paper was very well received. I thought it was very polished, very well presented, to say the least.
Thank you.
Um, raised the level of maybe some of the others who went after you, myself included, being like, oh, like that's how it's supposed to go, right? Um, I uh, I really also liked the one who was talking about Near Automata. I think I mentioned that that one stood out to me as being really strong, and it's a game that I have not played actually, but played with
Ah,
I played with Ben and Steve. They were both playing it, and they were streaming it. Like they're kind of taking turns streaming it when we played through it. So I'd sit there and talk to them while they were playing and watch them. Mostly Steve, I guess. Uh, and Ben had played before, so I don't know if he actually replayed the whole thing with us, but he
hmm,
was our kind of philosophical
yes.
interlocutor on that one. And I think those episodes turned out really well. They were really fun. I remember having a lot of fun with that game.
I
So I'm
think I'm going to
pumped.
listen to them soon because I started the game and I have to tell you, I was air saying in the plane, "Fuck yeah!" during the first scene when, when you're like this this fighter jet then turned into a mech and
It's wild, yeah.
my thumbs hurt after that. I had to calm down by playing Sonic 3, which I then beat after it because I was on a very long flight, and it's tough for me to read on flights. I don't retain information as well on
Hmm.
flights,
Hmm.
and they're just kind of a bummer. So playing Nier Automata and Sonic 3 was good.
Good
But
use of
yeah,
the
no,
time.
I look forward to visiting that because speaking of going out with individuals, our new possible listener, who was the videographer, was the one who suggested. I said, I have a long flight tomorrow. Is there any particular like RPG you would suggest? And she said Nier Automata for sure.
Right on. Good
And
taste.
and
Got
I
that
was
good
like,
taste.
okay. And I see that the music is really plotted, and some people call it the deepest game of all time. And
Hmm.
so,
Hmm.
what that I can't hear those sorts of claims without feeling the necessity to investigate them. It's sort of like Socrates hearing that there's a wise man around.
Right.
Whenever somebody says something is of epic or masterful or profound quality, that's something I generally want to try and sink my teeth into.
Cool.
And and that's something I wanted to add that I'm trying. So video game study is a very robust scholarly field. I should be
Hmm.
very clear about this. It's at least 25 years old, and these people are super serious, and there are books and books and tons of articles
Hmm.
about all aspects of video games. So I thought I was going to bring a bunch of new stuff to the table that had already totally been said before. And so it enabled me, I think, to get to an interesting place and to really do some mixed methodology um and and show that what I can bring is a tremendous level of rigor.
Hmm.
And I think other scholars do that too, but I think that that is kind of, as a scholar, my particular gift. And in
Hmm.
fact, somebody described me as a red mage afterwards, which I think anybody listening, that would be an extraordinarily accurate description. Is that
Nice.
I am not the sort of scholar that focuses on some tiny technical point. I like to bring broad concepts together, and I like to show the dignity underlying popular culture. Westworld, for example, obviously I've written on that. I see a tremendous value in that. I see value in online resources and also obviously these games, Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII, which I'm featuring prominently in two articles that I'm writing. And in
Nice.
fact, have put together a panel called Dante and Interactive Media. Obviously, that's not just video games, it can be board games, card games, anything with which one interacts that is media. And Dante, that'll be in San Francisco next
Mm,
March.
far out.
And that was something that was also on my last slide that I didn't include because I was getting over time. But I did send it again to our new friend, the videographer.
Cool.
And so uh, I thought it was sort of mission accomplished at the first level. I'm looking forward to writing these articles, but I'm looking more forward to writing these books with you. And
Hmm.
I don't
Yes.
care if we get rejected 50 times. It's like it's out there. I think it'll be good. We will have achieved everything. We will have a real perspective. And to me, that's the greatest thing an author can offer.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I think providing information or teaching us, conveying knowledge and perhaps even wisdom is very important. But I think there's a sort of other people to derive wisdom from your real experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and that's even better than giving people wise dicta to deal with.
Yeah, that goes back to the time when Sarah Miller and I presented about Harry Potter at a sci-fi convention here in Washington State. It was in Seattle. Um, Man, years ago now.
We
But the
might have to
recording
look at doing that.
that recording still exists. I know it's on the podcast feed somewhere, and it was great. It was like us basically saying that, but for an audience of families and kids, right? And being like, hey, like we're not going to tell you what this book is about. We're not going to get into like the lore so much as we're going to be like, actually, it's more fun when you read more slowly and look at things and look at details and start to make connections and piece things together and devise your own, reading of it. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's an incredible power there, and that certain books and games and things are really good at teaching people how to do that, right? Because you
Yes.
can't necessarily do it directly as the teacher. You have
Mm.
to have something that mediates and that they get involved in and participate in and are passionate about, and then those skills are kind of built for them in a unique way that's just theirs. Um, so that's yeah where I think that teaching quote unquote right video games is very promising. It's not in like a gamification per se, but in this other activity that is much more akin to contemplative meditative reading process that people might otherwise undertake with, I don't know, sacred literature and stuff like that.
Well, it's art for art's sake, and there's something what people fail to articulate about the difference between art and propaganda or art and advertising is that art that is simply used as a motivation to convey something or to sell something doesn't have the same level of soul or essence, nor does it have the same teleology, and thus teaches a totally
Mm,
different lesson from art for art's sake. The weird thing about art for art's sake, and I keep thinking art for art's sake. Sorry, it's hard to not pluralize the first art. Is that it makes somebody wonder why the person did it at all,
mhm, mhm,
which makes sort of interactive media weird because there's an obvious capitalist intent. But that's actually, I think, the tension of video
yeah,
games, which
yeah,
are, though not a single author or a collective endeavor to some extent, but a hierarchical collective endeavor. These Japanese companies are not socialist by any means, and they have to make money, but there's still the notion of the true artist, and
mm,
that's still considered the apex, the archetype.
yeah,
The reason is because true art conveys information that is more essential to the core of some real thing.
yeah,
And I know that's an abstract definition, but art is obviously infinitely ranging, and there are so many things that have essences.
mm,
But I think it also gives one the capacity to make connections between essential things. It helps people to see the difference between what is essential and what is accidental
mm,
to a thing. And thus, I think it teaches one about the nature of a person and how to be an understanding and empathetic person as well. Because you can see a person for who they're trying to be or who they are, or you can see a game for that. And so you can be critical of the necessary things that need to be done in order for the essence to come through best. Like
mm.
when you grade writing, for example.
So
But yeah.
this part of your talk was really cool, right? Where you're talking about like how are these games produced? It's a whole system. It's a whole exchange of culture and practices of business and marketing and this and right. This gets into the sense of in which the essence of a game does or does not carry forward in its sequels slash remakes slash right
Ah,
spin-offs.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's a really cool way to try to tackle that question. Again, it would involve actually playing some of those games eventually, which I have been very reticent to do.
You're just going to get a PS5 in the mail at some point.
Switch 2. I think Switch 2 is going to be able to play most of these games. I'm pretty
Oh
sure.
man, you break my heart when you say things like that, Wes. But I understand you have kids now, and
Yeah, it's got to be the Switch 2. I mean, for Mario Kart alone,
I
it's
think you have to wait till the OLED comes out. Though people are really critical of this first version of the
mm,
Switch. They say the
yeah,
battery,
not in a
not
rush. I'm
rushed.
not in a
Yeah,
rush.
of course not.
Sorry, no,
No,
but I cut you off. Sorry,
no, no,
you're
no, no. No, that's all to the point. But yes, trying to get at the essence of something and whether the
yeah.
adaptation brings the essence out of it. And this is sort of Jungian in that like you I say you want one wants to be who one is as well as possible, to play one's role as well
Mm,
as possible. And one has a sense of self-criticism when one doesn't do that either professionally, within one's relationships. We do all sorts of things to ignore these facts, but we have to ignore them
mm,
because they're real. And so I think part of being a literary critic, but also an amateur philosopher, is to try and see whether there is an essence of something in order to bring it out,
mm,
so that the thing can be what it really desires and is perhaps made to be, depending on whether one accepts some sort of natural teleology or divine teleology as opposed to an existentialist teleology. It's like even if one chooses to be something, that still creates telos.
Mm,
Existentialism doesn't make one purely free. It just liberates one from the necessity of a single choice. Um, but the next steps are all very similar. You know,
yeah.
sticking to something and making something of it, I think, is what makes something potentially great because there's just more, again, art in it. And like you said, you have to take it in, or one is best takes it in slowly, like so many things that are fine art, like a good whiskey or a good espresso. One does not chug these things. You taste them, you sip them, you enjoy them, you ponder what's in them.
Mm,
And I think that this is the pleasure of indulging in art, but also what the artist sets out to do. And I think that's what we're setting out to do as well. So we have this uneasy relationship with scholarship because obviously we're a little bit different from traditional scholars.
mm.
But uh, one can be an artist scholar, and I think many people aspire to be
Mm.
such.
Yeah, that's a thing that I keep coming back to as well, right? Eventually, we're gonna have to make a game, right? There's nothing for it,
Oh
and
wow.
that's where connections are super important, right? You cannot, with very few exceptions, you can't do this on your own. You need a team. You need a very big team. You need a Claire Obscure sized team of people to help you with the game that you want to
You
make.
well, and something we can do as we continue to produce more and more stuff is reach out to some of these game makers
Hmm. Hmm.
and share some ideas. And something I'm very interested in doing is reaching out to Square and saying, "Hey, I'd like to consult you on your uses of mythology. You know, I'm a professional
Mm.
scholar, classicist, and medievalist.
Yeah,
I actually have a paper out on Dante's use of the griffin
cool.
in Purgatorio 29, which is under review right now, but I hope is accepted. But if it's not, I think it's a really good piece, so I'll send it somewhere else.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I
Go straight up to Square. Why not? I mean,
yeah,
they have been putting out more and more of the background, but it's all curated by them, of course, in form of these Ultimanias, which you cited, right?
yes,
And that's a lot of that is behind the MJ Gallagher book that I have finally sat down to read in the course of writing my paper, the Norse myths. And he has another one about the
yes,
Phoenix that's coming out soon if it hasn't already. And I think he has a Greco-Roman one as well. So
yes.
he's very prolific, very well read, and he knows the Ultimanias like back to front. I mean, it's crazy. So it's a great distillation, right? Talking about the essence of a thing, where I don't have to read the whole Ultimania if I can look at what he's got and I can find my way to the key parts of it. That's very helpful for me. And he's another person that I have reached out to and I would reach out to again, potentially just to, understand a bit better some of his methodology and the things he chooses to focus on, right? The things he chooses to raise up and the things he chooses to downplay, at least so far. Um,
Maybe you could say you want to interview him for a paper or something like that,
mhm, mhm.
that you want to present on something. And since he has these books, but doesn't necessarily have a bunch of published articles, maybe he can inform you about what he's thinking about that sort of.
Y- Yeah, he's definitely more in that sort of popular audience facing realm. But but again, there's tons of interest, both scholarly and popular, about these
Yes,
questions,
yes.
uh, and that's where, if he can make a book, we can make a book. And
Well,
it's
I
just
think
a
that's
question
really,
of
yeah.
it's a strategy question of okay, what kind of book should we make first, right? What should we try to shape out of this, at least initially,
Well,
that people
I
would actually read? So,
I think you might I think you might have put your finger on it already. I think maybe it should say parallax somewhere in it.
mm,
And maybe, I mean, there are a lot of ways we could structure it, but we could even each tackle a question from our own perspectives, or, just have a theme like war or love, and
mm,
then talk about it. Or it could even feature conversations, though I consider that kind of like a later stage career thing.
yeah,
People decide they want to listen to you after you've
yeah.
achieved something to them. Then all of a sudden they think, your words have mana. But hopefully, what we say when if we make it ever. That's the and so if you follow it all the way down, you just keep seeing good stuff. And eventually we will have been at our peak and younger. And I think people will really, if they keep listening to us and if more of them do, like enjoy seeing our early stuff.
Hmm. Here's hoping. Here's
It's like,
hoping.
man, they were really sharp back then.
Uh, I don't know. Like, yeah, most of the time I I have to listen back to remember what it was we talked about on the previous episode. So I'm hoping that this is helpful for other people. It's definitely helpful for me. Um, and I think in terms of the summer, like just looking forward as to what we could tackle next, I, I, I feel like we can probably speed up a bit, take off bigger chunks of FF8 each week here, or as often as we can, uh, our schedules allow over the summer. Um, and then, I mean, there's still those other games that are in this same basic space, right? You have Final Fantasy Tactics, you have Xenogears, huge one. Of course, the Chrono series, and then Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy X, right? That whole sort of that that golden age or that waning of the golden age of the JRPG.
As it were. Yes, that'll be something we have to decide. And yes, perhaps you're feeling the necessity of deciding on that. Did the golden age, when did it jump the shark? When did it peak? Was this in fact a golden age? And the question that I really wanted to tackle in my paper and want to tackle is, can a game that represents transformation in fact instigate transformation? Can
Hmm.
it be
Hmm.
transformational to play a video game? Does the character one plays transform in a way similar to how one as a player transforms while playing the game?
Yeah, yeah. There's there's that one example that Resonant Art talked about recently, or maybe not so recently. I don't remember when it was, but anyway, I might have been listening in their back catalog. But someone who basically writes a letter to Square saying, like this game saved my life. I think it was Final Fantasy
Yes.
IX that they're talking about.
Yes.
But yeah, yeah. So clearly yes, right? And it's just a matter of how do we sift the incredible amount of data that's out there that attests to this and kind of mold it in a way that's compelling and, as you say, rigorous, right? So there's that question. Yes.
Well, I think as long as our real perspective comes through, we will have offered something of value. But yes, then there are also, of course, technical questions. But those are the things that those are the things we do with all the other hours of the day. Uh, um, so speaking of moving quicker, then, do you think for next time we should finish disc two?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many like little episodes that entails, but this is around the point where I stopped playing as a kid. I got to, revisit the lighthouse. I think that it was around there that you acquire the Alexander materia, or
Hmm.
not materia, GF, right? Sorry. Anyway, GF Alexander is coming up soon. And then there's some stuff where you're going to go on the White Seeds ship. I think that's sort of, and there's a Laguna episode in there somewhere. That's some of the things I know are coming up, sort of, kinda, and might bring us close to the end of disc two. I'm not sure exactly.
Yes, I think there are two more things. Sorry, there's sort of insect I just had to get rid of. It would have escaped had I not dealt with it then. But I think there are two episodes left, and we're going to deal with Galbadia Garden,
Hmm.
and yeah, I think we still have to fight them. And there's one other thing from what I looked up most recently, and so we're pretty close.
Okay.
And I think we'll make up for the last few episodes if they've been heavy on theory and light on game description,
Right.
with having some pretty exciting stuff to talk about. I think the fight between Galbadia Garden and Balam Garden coming has one of the coolest FMVs I had ever seen when I saw it, and is just going to be very fun to explore with you.
Sounds good. Garden battle. Got it. All right.
Well, I know it's kind of early today, but I'm still a little the worse for wear myself. And
No, thanks for making the time. It's
no,
really
no, no,
helpful.
absolutely. And happy, of course, happy Father's Day to you. So thank
Mm.
you for making the time because, and I hope that you get to play some video games with William, or
Oh
something
yeah.
fun. He's always with fun games. And Charlie too, of course. But hopefully your family's doing some nice stuff for you. I mean, they've obviously already given you the time to do this, so
That's right. The gift of time. No, we went and picked strawberries this morning. They're gonna come to soccer later, and it's yeah, it'll be a good day. Thanks for
I
that.
I don't think the listeners know Wes was actually a college soccer player, so we expect
Long,
great
long
things
ago,
from these youngins. Um, at least they'll have a good coach. And
perhaps.
I've seen Wes play soccer too, and in fact drafted him onto my intramural team at
That's
St. John,
that's right.
uh, and we were crushingly good.
Uh,
I think we outscored our opponent something like 15-3 during the course of that tournament. It was really a pleasure.
good times. Good times.
Yes, other
Glory
side
days.
quest. So side
That's
quest from the
right.
past.
That's right.
Uh, all right. Well, it was a pleasure, and I guess I need to get cracking on playing this Final Fantasy VIII. But to honor your paper, I guess I should say, well, let's mosey.
Mm,
Uh, uh,
whatever.
yeah, whatever. Yeah, no, I was hoping somebody would yell that out when I asked what was Squall's, favorite word, but nobody said anything, and I was like, oh, come on, this is well known. But
Come on.
okay, last thing. To your point about not summarizing Final Fantasy VII, I can understand why you wouldn't do that because it does seem like Don Quixote, like the Odyssey,
Mm,
such a popular text, such a popular game that it doesn't require summary.
yeah, that was my
But
take as well.
but I was I was glad that I summarized Final Fantasy VIII, because to my surprise, it didn't seem like everybody had played it, and well, it was just a very diverse crowd because of that. Some people were more into cards or like interactive
Yeah.
games and all sorts of really interesting, like Dungeons and Dragons, for example. That was something presented on and touched on in multiple papers, and so it's like an interesting mix of people because obviously, I would say, or not obviously, but Magic the Gathering had a huge impact on me growing up and
Oh
playing,
yeah.
competing in that, and that's not a video game, um, and also is very different in what it offers, than a video game, and so
And
you have,
these
yeah,
these are having kind of a renaissance now too. And maybe it's
yes,
because
yes,
people of our age are, have some disposable income, and
um,
then, they're raising their kids to like the stuff that they liked as kids or whatever it might be. Um, but there's also some crossover there, right?
yes.
There's the Square Wizards of the Coast, like unholy alliance of popular culture, where they're making cards about people from the games.
Yeah, and I got to say, it's unbelievable that they made Sephiroth a 3/2 creature. I'm like 7/7. Let's be real.
Come
This,
on.
this you don't even understand the psychology of Sephiroth. He,
Maybe they're talking about his human form, before he's deified or whatever.
you never know with these adaptations. That's the thing that we've been talking about this entire time, Wes. When every adaptation is its own attempt at getting at the essence of something better. I
Mm,
think I claim, and so. So some adaptations do it better and worse.
yeah.
And hopefully when we get you to play Final Fantasy VII remake and
Remake,
Rebirth
yeah.
and re
Crisis
whatever.
Core, Dirge of Cerberus, Before Crisis, Advent Children. I guess that's a movie. I don't know. There's like so many. I'm never gonna play all these, but I will delve into the literature on them. So
Well, at the very least, William won't claim that these games look old.
that's
So
right. Yeah. He's a tough critic. Yeah, but we'll see.
yeah, well, his discernment starts young for some people. And well, my friend, thank you very much for making the time for this. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your wonderful presentation. And
Mm.
you really did a great job juggling so many things. And I don't think a lot of people can manage classroom while giving a scholarly paper. And
Uh,
and
Jack of all trades, master of none, right?
and then
But
I
likewise, yeah. Thanks for inviting me to do it. I wouldn't have known about it. I wouldn't have. submitted anything. Yeah.
And also, your student had a wonderful piece of art based on Gustav Klimt's The Kiss.
Yeah, that's right. Venti's paint, so cool. Yeah, so I'll
And
definitely put a post up soon with all that
and
stuff.
Venti also got a shout out from one of the scholars in the audience who complimented Venti's work.
Yeah, cool.
So well done, Vinti, from me and from the scholarly community, as it were. And I think it's really cool that the students got to see you give a scholarly paper and got to hear scholarly questions and comments and things like that. I think it's not real to a lot of people because they've never experienced it, but to see it
Yeah.
being done can really open one's eyes.
It's especially on the, second to last day of school. They were surprisingly engaged. I was pleased with it. Yeah.
Yes, well, well done. As you said, you have a consideration for pedagogy, and so I think mission accomplished. That side quest, you get you get the treasure chest at the end.
The golden
course.
chocobo.
Of
Yes.
course, that doesn't apply to Final Fantasy VIII. There are no treasure chests. One of the many differences between it and the sort of archetype. That's the one thing we wanted to talk about in the pre-show that we didn't talk about, by the way, but we'll get to it.
Yeah.
To talk about how Final Fantasy VIII is potentially not liked as much because it diverges from the RPG archetype too far. But that's for another time because we've already said we were getting off the air 2 or 3 times, and I think that's usually about our limit.
Right on. Till next time.
Till next time, my friend, let's beat that second disc.
Thanks.